Welcome back to Clarify Everything, the podcast where Matt and Shane dive deep into the world of technology, artificial intelligence, and cutting-edge science. Whether you're a tech enthusiast, a curious thinker, or just trying to keep up with the fast-paced world of innovation, we got you covered. Each episode brings you the latest breakthroughs and expert insights, fun discussions on topics that are shaping our future. As always, I'm your host, Shane Kirk, and joined by one Mr. Matt Barry. Tune in, subscribe, and join the conversation as we clarify everything. Drop your questions in the comments and concerns below, or email us at mattandshane@clarify-tech.com. Man, I feel like it's been so long since we did one, but it really has only been a week.
It's been a week. I know, but a lot has happened in a week.
Oh, man. So just to jump in right off the rip, I feel like there's some big things that have been happening in the world of AI, especially. Like we talked a lot about DeepSeek and a little bit about Trump's AI bill last week. But something I wanted to talk about was I saw this news article. I don't know if you've seen anything about it, but OpenAI clinches deal with Keiko, I think that's how it says, and talked with SoftBank about Samsung about the new Stargate deal with Trump's AI process or AI bill. And I feel like we're starting to see this almost culmination of large AI companies that are invested or working in AI come together to basically get a piece of the pie in this $500 billion. And I just wanted to see what you maybe thought about this.
Well, I mean, first, I don't know if President Trump actually signed an AI bill. I think he signed a project, and I encourage anybody listening to give us some clarity on that. And the project was Project Stargate, $500 billion, and SoftBank, committed to it, and Oracle committed to it, and even OpenAI committed some of their own money. I think the tune was 40 billion that they agreed to invest in the $500 million project. I think it's interesting and worth noting that committing $40 billion and then turning around a few days later and saying they're going to launch another funding round at a valuation of $300 billion to try and scare up some of that money seems a little bit like putting the cart before the horse. But there's probably things that I don't know in that space.
Yeah.
But it would be interesting to dive a little bit deeper into that as well. And to kind of unpack the meat of the question there, is everybody trying to get into this AI gold rush, and do that? And the answer is obviously yes. Everybody wants a piece of the pie. So it's like, give me that money. But the key in this is that Project Stargate represents infrastructure, and that is a big thing that the U.S. has done a lot of, whether that's building the interstate highway system or the air traffic control system or our electrical grid. All of those things are infrastructure oriented. This is how we deliver a service of some type, whether that service is power or water to your house or getting on the freeway or the toll roads, things like that. That infrastructure exists to provide a service. So my understanding is that the $500 billion is create infrastructure to deliver AI as a service to companies and individuals kind of spread out across the board. So getting into that gold rush, okay, I want to build some infrastructure is really good for certain companies, most notably, Oracle in this space is like, we're going to build a billion data centers, stuff like that. But the money that's supposed to generate jobs, I don't know how much of that's actually going to happen. I don't know how many of our listeners actually know what goes on inside a data center, but you don't have 100,000 employees in a data center. You got 12, who are running around like racking servers and things like that. And you have some security guards. And most of these data centers, I assume, are going to be built anyway because we're running out of compute for a lot of things, not just for AI, which I think is evidenced by Larry Ellison a few days after the Project Stargate was announced, saying Project Stargate is already underway and showing pictures of a data center that Oracle is building that's nearly complete. That sounds an awful lot like, hey, we were building a data center and now we're going to use it for AI, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that, but that doesn't mean that it was an effect of Project Stargate. It was just, we need more money to take this further. Everyone can benefit from a good artificial intelligence system. Everyone can. Whether that is scientists, we're currently diving in with not DeepSeek, the deep research module that OpenAI just came out with, or the O3 model that's just coming out, the reasoning model that they just came out with, or using DeepSeek or other open source solutions like HubSpot launched OpenR1, which is a completely open distilled version of DeepSeek R1. And whether you want to run that on your home computer or you want to subscribe, there's a function that each of these systems solve. There's a problem they represent. Some people are just using it to write absolutely the most bitchin' cover letter you've ever seen when you're trying to apply for a job. And other people are using it to solve advanced mathematical problems, and looking at protein data, things like that that we need to develop medications. The infrastructure will support all of that, hopefully for a lot of different people and not just for one company. The hope is that OpenAI is not the only ones who are going to benefit from this, SoftBank's investment and Oracle's investment in the data centers, but that OpenAI can kind of lead the way in this corporate benefit that a lot of organizations are going to benefit from.
Right. And you had kind of mentioned like AI benefits everyone. And I think that's kind of an interesting segue into another thing I saw that happened recently was OpenAI said that it will be rolling out an education specific version of its chatbots to 23 CSU campuses, right?
Mhm.
And so I guess for me, my question here is just A, what do you think an education specific chatbot is compared to like what it already does just on like its normal function, right? And so at least for me, coming out of college, a lot of people were already using ChatGPT to like learn insights about like whatever class they were taking, whether it was, maybe properly used, like something like microbiology or something like that, or like for me in like marketing and stuff. So
So,
I guess for my question was just is what do you think the actual specific changes to ChatGPT for an education purpose is? And then how do you think that actually makes an impact for students coming up today?
so Shane, I think you probably stumbled on a much larger question than we can even cover in a single episode. So I'm going to try and
Okay.
break this down a little bit. So there are a number of things that you can do to improve on a base model or a frontier model or a general model to make it more specific to a
Right.
specific subject. Whether that's the system prompt or the actual consumer prompt that's being put in, the prompt that generates the response, or the parameters, or if it's doing retrieval augmentation, or if it's searching different data sets, or if it's got a limited weight set. So there's a lot of levers and things you can pull up to and including, adjusting the temperature in the response itself, to make the machine more creative as it's coming up with those responses. So I think the benefit of a general model, as most of OpenAI's models are, is it's very broad so that you can narrow it and make it better in a particular space. Now there's some architectural arguments about how to do that and some security controls and some security worries and things like that associated with it that at Clarify we adjust a little differently. We're using a different way of structuring it. Our model is not just an OpenAI model with wrapper around it, but it is specifically trained and designed for the medical space right now, the Clara version. So I think there is some desire to do that, to make specific models that are very good in a specific space. And the general model that OpenAI is using affords a lot of that. So they can make this model very specific. But I think the way we should look at this is taking a step back and thinking about the problem that we're trying to solve before we actually build something as a solution for that. So if you bear with me for just a minute, a lot of project managers have said frequently, if a client comes to you and says, I want to build a fence. A lot of project managers or project owners will say, okay, well, what kind of fence? Well, how tall do you want? Where do you want? What's the best question you should ask is, why do you want to build a fence?
Right.
Do you want to build a fence because you want to keep something in or something out? What do you want to do? Because you might not even need a fence. Maybe you just need a camera. So there's a lot of different
Yeah.
ways you can look at it, but you've got to figure out what the source reason is to solve that problem. So I think OpenAI has created a general model and is now looking for problems to solve with it instead of a problem that generated a solution, which is a common approach in tech. You've got something that's really cool. You're like, hey, I want to use it to solve these 17 other problems. How are we going to do that? Well, you haven't actually identified the problem. So you're kind of building a solution. This is if you have a hammer, everything is a nail.
You're
So
right.
I think the question that OpenAI is trying to address is that as you said, a lot of college students are using AI. They're using Chat GPT. They're asking questions. So maybe this model, which I haven't experimented with it myself personally, so I can't speak to it with any level of authority, is using various controls and systems to aim more in the educational space. Okay, so how do you do the right kind of citations? How does
Right.
write something with the correct AMA or APA citations in it? How do you do research around molecular biology in particular, or biochemistry, or organic chemistry? So it's not the very general type Google approach, like I'm just going to check the whole internet, but there's some
Right.
very specific functions that have been optimized. And maybe, they've improved the math engine on the back end so it can actually do some very deep functional math. As you were actually here for a chain at our office when I started screaming and yelling about Copilot trying that equation until it melted itself down. So this was in the early days when the math modules weren't actually working properly. And
Right.
it's improved pretty dramatically. So maybe this is an improvement in that space where they're like, hey, we made some educational improvements. It's going to work great. And you can then use it for an educational tool that will help benefit things. My opinion, I think it generates a really important question. What is this specific educational tool and what problem are you trying to solve? A lot of students are already, well, I let ChatGPT write 80% of my papers anyway. So, I've divorced critical thinking from critical writing. I just want to get it done so I can check the box and have the degree. So is the device, is the system, is, the OpenAI model actually helping to educate you? Or is it accelerating the divide that we already have between graduating with a significant education and understanding on how to think and simply graduating with a piece of paper?
Right. For me, I don't know. We talked about this last week a little bit where it was like ChatGPT is going to be struggling to find a way to monetize, especially after the DeepSeek release, right?
Mhm.
And
OpenAI.
so, like, yeah, sorry, OpenAI. And so, like, from my perspective, like, I came from like studying business and these types of things, where a lot of the courses here, especially at like UC Davis, are solely focused on people, right? And interviewing people and getting in touch with your client and understanding their actual pain points and their problems. And that's where you generate a solution and where a business thrives, right?
Mhm.
And so, kind of like you mentioned in tech, it's almost backwards,
Mhm.
where people come up with this new technology and then they almost like try to find a solution or try to find a problem where this becomes a solution.
Mhm.
And this almost to me feels like DeepSeek or not DeepSeek, OpenAI has been in this position where it was just kind of a cool technology. And now they're almost like, okay, we need to adapt our model to actually become a solution
Yeah.
in these spaces. But now it becomes almost like you mentioned, how do you actually become a solution for these problems that people are facing? And does it actually educate you? Does it actually, or does it just check a box? And especially in the space of like college, for example, where people I feel like we're most likely to at least use AI. Like I'm not a parent personally, but you have young children. Like, would you want your fifth grader using OpenAI to learn how to read? Like, or the thing is for me, it's almost like now do you create an OpenAI for every field of study or a Chat GPT for every field? Do you
Mhm.
have a chemistry AI? Do you have a biology AI? Do you have a marketing AI? Like all these things, and so now it almost feels like a can of worms and like that you're opening up. I'm not saying that's impossible. Obviously, training models and
Oh
things.
yeah. Yeah.
Like you, once you have a model, you can kind of train it on whatever you
Yeah.
want. So it is doable, but now it becomes on the back end of the business supporting all these different like products that you're offering. It's almost like have you really thought this through almost? And I understand that a lot of this
Yeah.
is competitive market based, right? Like they don't want Alphabet or Google to like infiltrate these spaces or create a beachhead
Right.
within these markets. And so, but it's almost like Sam Altman. It's like, or maybe not Sam Altman is a good example, but OpenAI. It's almost like, are you sure you're like willing to do this where you have ChatGPT that has such a stranglehold on the market right now that it's, do you really know what you're getting into?
Well, and I think you're right, in a couple of different spaces, more right than you know. The OpenAI tool, ChatGPT it's not, let's back up and talk about an analogy. ChatGPT is not a lightsaber. It's not like crazy sci-fi level advanced technology and stuff like that for our current, technology role. No AI is. So I'm not trying
Right.
to disparage OpenAI or anything like that. They're doing good work. But It's not a lightsaber. It's a really bitchin' screwdriver. It's a really bitchin' screwdriver. So it's like it's got the right handle, it's got carbon fiber and all this fancy stuff with LEDs in
Gold
it.
plated.
Yeah, it's like it's a really custom memory foam grip. It's a really bitchin' screwdriver, but its job is still to put a screw in. That's still what you do. You still turn and put the screw in. It's not a hammer. It's not a socket
Right.
wrench. It's not a pipe wrench. It's not a oil filter puller. It's not a torque wrench. It's not a lug wrench. It's a really good screwdriver. And anybody at any point, whether you're an engineer or at home fixer upper or handyman, has tried to put a nail in with a screwdriver and realize how bad an idea that is. The only reason I know that is because I've done it. The
Hey,
so,
everything's a hammer if you try hard enough. All right.
right, right. You shoot your fist until you put a hole in it. But it's not that I know that works, but it in this case, you've built a really bitchin' screwdriver, but you're not going to make billions and billions and billions of dollars selling a really bitchin' screwdriver. So you've got to make everybody think that the screwdriver is the only tool that you need.
Right.
It's the only one that'll work. It's the ultimate multi-tool. When in reality, if you made a really bitchin' screwdriver and sold a really bitchin' screwdriver, take a step back and say, now I'm gonna make a bitchin' hammer. And then make
Right.
a really bitchin' hammer. So there are people on both ends of the argument. Well, this bitchin' screwdriver is actually a lightsaber, and you can do just about anything you want with a lightsaber. Oh, well, this bitchin' screwdriver is not even a good screwdriver.
Right.
Where I fall is kind of in the middle. OpenAI in general and ChatGPT in particular is amazing transformational technology, but its breadth of purpose is not nearly as broad as how it is being presented. So, do we build a tool that then solves a problem that may or may not exist? Sure, but you're not going to make billions. In order to make billions, you have to solve a problem that exists for a lot of people. And then those people have to pay a nominal rate for a good service that solves their problem. This is business 101. So in the space we're in right now, especially in artificial intelligence, I think OpenAI solved a pretty sizable problem for a pretty sizable number of people, but that problem is not worth the cost that it would take to
Right.
solve it. So, as an example, for our purposes, for what I do from a scientific perspective and engineering perspective, if ChatGPT was hyper functional and very fast and $500 a month and solved all these little issues I had, I could look up tools, I could look up measurements, I could do metric analysis, it'd be worth $500 a month. I would pay for that. But there's not a lot of people out there who are going to be able to pay $500 a month. So you have a small market. So you've got to drive that price down. So you do it with investor capital and venture capital money and things like that so that it ends up costing you less money. But ultimately, at that point, you kind of get this idea that your tool can do anything. And in reality, it can't. And then upstarts like DeepSeek or QWEN or Berkeley with the Sky
Right.
model show up and say, "Hey, we found a way to quantize this for $30." You know, so and then thinking about that, okay, well, that's how innovation works. Like if
Hmm.
you're Sam Altman and you see someone, if I were in his shoes and I saw somebody at Berkeley that said, hey, we figured out how to take DeepSeek and make this model that performs within 80-90% of OpenAI, and we spent $30, my next phone call would be to that guy and be like, so when you started OpenAI, you should work here now. And then like you have hoovered up this knowledge so that you can increase the effectiveness of your product instead of trying to disparage or discourage anybody from doing that work in the open source. But that's the problem. Their OpenAI's knowledge capital is the product. So if
Right.
it comes out and other people do it, then what they're selling doesn't do the same thing. You've built another solution that would be cheaper and easier. And this is the problem that goes back to what you talked about originally in tech. I suffered with this. Everybody does. You build a solution and it does 1,200 things. Like, what are we going to do? Which one do we want to sell? So you try and sell all 1,200 of them. And eventually one of them kind of bubbles up. This is your problem and where things are working. With the incredible power that actual artificial intelligence represents, I don't know if that model is going to work. I think you
Right.
actually have to find a problem, take your AI, narrow it, make it solve that problem, and then find a next problem, and then
Right.
keep
Yeah.
going through that process. And OpenAI and Anthropic and Google and, you know, I mean, there's actually quite a bit more than that now, have an advantage and that they have an established foothold and revenue space within the market so that they can do this innovation. And I think now the actual businesses that are solving problems using AI as a tool are going to see some accelerations, and they're going to
Right.
start more popular.
That's actually a good segue into my next like kind of like comment was coming from like the business side, right? Many companies are able to like charge a premium based on like specific aspects within like the buyer's journey, right? And so the latter two like stages in your buyer's journey are retention and loyalty, right? And it's basically how do you build customer retention and loyalty, and a lot of that has to do with a product that delivers and how people interact with the company itself, right? And so where OpenAI I see a huge problem, especially in retention and loyalty, is not only have they kind of been maybe not now, but in the previous years, been kind of missing the mark on this like product offering on their value proposition where people go to ChatGPT because they know it's there, they consider the product, and then they choose to use ChatGPT, but then say it doesn't give the answer they want, right? Or it say it doesn't work in the way they need it to. Or even then they're being stifled in a way that teachers don't want their students to use ChatGPT, or employers don't want their employees to use it. And so already it's turning into like almost a negative connotation. And so I see this the school move where moving into CSU was as a great step for the business itself because now they're overcoming one of the obstacles that has held them back where it's people are or maybe not now, but previously, like in the business, there was somewhat of a stigma around using AI within schools. And now, if they can supersede that by partnering with the schools, they can then increase customer retention and loyalty through a great experience with their company and their product, moving on like later into that customer's lifetime, right? And so, I think the idea there is a they need to increase revenue, they need to deal with their expensive margins, but two they're also having a problem with keeping customers at OpenAI as opposed to moving to something like Copilot, right?
Right.
Or moving to something like DeepSeek. And so I think that this move not only is a great profit move, but it's almost a good tactical move for them going forward as a business and moving it potentially into further research like AGI or ASI, these things where we are able to lock in on a core demographic and ensure that their experience with our company is great. And
Hmm.
from any company's perspective, coming in as maybe like a consultant, that is one of the largest problems companies have. People ask the question is like, why do my water bottles not sell like Yeti? Right. So it's like not only does Yeti's quality always hit, but their experience with the company itself, whether it be lifetime warranties or replacement parts or customer service, these are things that truly sell customers on staying with your company, right? Like if you are an Apple Watch user over like a Garmin user, like why do you pick them over anyone else? And I think that it's becoming a problem for maybe not a problem for OpenAI, but a challenge for OpenAI to be why do we use OpenAI over say Copilot, DeepSeek, Berkeley? Like why do we do these things? And now it's becoming almost it's funny to me to be like so look at this from a business perspective instead of like a tech perspective because they're facing business problems. And like the thing is or maybe not problems, but business hurdles, let's say,
Right.
and they're almost trying to like from the outside looking in, if you look at it from a tech perspective, it doesn't make sense, right? It's like why do this? You have a product, like all these things, but when you look at it from a business perspective, it truly kind of unlocks that like okay, for them to live for the next 30 years they need to do something, and this just makes sense.
Well, and you've unpacked an interesting aspect of all of technology. And I make kind of a dumb joke about it. At some point in human history, the wheel was advanced technology.
Right.
Fire was advanced technology. The catapult was advanced technology. It it's the application of knowledge into a mechanical a reality is all
Right.
technology is. And we have this almost religious fervor when it comes to technology now. Like we're gonna give birth to a god, and then we're gonna put it on a leash because we're a bunch of idiots. It's that's not necessarily how things are working. It's this is still a business. It still requires consumers. You still have to pay for it. So whether those consumers are a business to business structure and you're selling OpenAI's Chat GPT to the university itself, and
Right.
then the university sells that as part of your tuition to the students, great. But I would turn that around and I would say, how many students are then going to be in the same situation you mentioned earlier, where this isn't doing what I want to do? So I'm going to now explore a different product. So in the buyer's journey, when they make a decision to commit and stay with the product, like this is something I like. A lot of that is not necessarily the structure of the garden. Apple and their walled garden, I mean, in order to use stuff, we have to give it the okay. Or Google and Samsung with their open garden, which is you can bring whatever you want as long as it doesn't infect anything significantly. Is OpenAI going to become a walled garden or an open garden? Are they going to interact with open source? Altman was on record recently saying that he doesn't want to be on the wrong side of history when it comes to open source. And I think you have a couple of large companies, three or four large companies, and an entire army of scientific researchers who are now able to experiment at smaller and smaller levels. And because of that requirement, someone out there is bound to come up with an educational tool that might be better than OpenAI at the
Mhm.
schools. Now, are we going to know about that? No, unless they have a really good marketing engine, or they got a lot of people watching their tool, or they got a lot of people paying attention. The old adage, I worked 20 years to become an overnight success.
Right.
They are they going to be great? Now, the community right now is really hungry for actual solutions to actual problems. So you got a lot of people out there that are thinking about those problems and looking at the various tools they can use to kind of, make a recipe to kind of put it together. Here's this tool and this module and this model and this thing. Let's put it all together into an actual solution to a problem. I think that OpenAI is attempting to transition from being a knowledge capital organization, basically a research think tank, into an actual for profit product organization. That's a hard shift. That's difficult
Mhm.
to do because you have to productize all of that knowledge capital, which means you have to solve a problem and you have to present that solution through marketing and through sales. And all of that's challenging. All of that's difficult. Otherwise, everybody and their brother, although they are starting things up, would be a successful startup. So I think in this space, the challenge is always going to be uphill, no matter how good the product is, until you have a business brand that is beyond compare. As a consumer, because it's a luxury product, you can trust Apple products.
Right.
They're going to work. And if they don't, they're going to give you a refund or give you a new product or whatever it is. And it's going to tie into the ecosystem almost as seamlessly as possible. Now that's shifted over the last few years. So we're not sure how that's going to continue, but odds are you can trust that. That Google products are going to work. You are going to be able to sign into Gmail every day.
Right.
So that level of trust is currently not something that OpenAI can enjoy. They have to earn that from the consumer market. And they do that by delivering a product that people need that's inexpensive, that they will continue to trust over the long term. So, right now, I think out of those three components, delivering a product that people need, solves a problem that people can trust. I think OpenAI is doing none of these completely and is working toward all three of those kind of across the board. And the journey that they're following will be interesting to see. Because it would be really cool to see them actually innovate without so much of the Kool-Aid drinking, we're going to give birth to a god. Because there's a
Right.
lot of really bitchin' stuff that's coming out of OpenAI. The new O3 model and the deep research models are stellar. They are really good, but they're not AGI. It's not
Right.
an intelligent conscious machine. That whether we're talking about emergent intelligence or anything like that. And the same question is there. What problem are those two models solving? Oh, they speed up research for researchers. Great. What problem are they solving? Oh, well, they're trying to cure X or treat Y or build Z. Okay. Is that a problem that's going to generate more revenue over time? Or is that something they're going to solve and it's going to be done? So this leads into this giant hodgepodge, and the same thing is in the education space. What are you trying to solve? So I'll give you the classic example. We've both been in school. We've both done a ton of schooling. So when you're in school now, and you sit down and you read through your syllabus, and the professor says, "Okay, here's all the stuff you have to know, and here's all the information you have to understand." There's always that line in there now: do not use generative AI,
Yeah.
because there is a connection between the ability to read, ingest, process, and write that creates critical thinking. There is an article all over Reddit right now that says, and I wish I could find the source of the article. If anybody can find it, please post it. That says AI, generative AI, is creating a generation of illiterate software developers. Now, people who can write software because they're using generative AI, but don't understand the mechanics or the logic
Right.
of how that software actually works. So the response that comes out is, oh, well, I don't understand why software developers exist at all, because I can just put in 4 prompts and OpenAI will to generate all this stuff. Now, first of all, that's bitching. Before we
That's
go
cool.
anywhere
That is cool.
else, so let's not decry that these generative models can do that, because that's friggin' cool, being able to do that. But that introduces a potential product or piece of software that could be rife with risks, because
Mhm.
the system that is building that is doing exactly what you tell it to do. And if you tell it to build something that does not meet security regulations, or does not logically operate the right way, or presents data incorrectly because you don't know the fundamentals of how to build software, then
Right.
you've created a security risk that's going to melt down, instead of an actual tool that's going to be effective for people. So I think these illiterate, quote unquote, software developers that are being created by all of these tools, I think the next generation software developer that we're actually working with right now is an actual engineer. They understand the mechanics of how the computer works. They understand the mechanics of how the software interacts. They understand the logic and the language of what they're trying to create. And then that creates a design and architecture, which then you can iterate code on rapidly and quickly using your OpenAI solution, or your Gemini solution, or your Anthropic solution, Claude, and say, oh, here, now I got really good code, and I've made sure it meets architectural requirements and security standards, and uses the right identity protection systems, and blah, 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 blah. Does all of these great things that software developers know over time. That same, that's analogous to the students. You're creating a student that knows how to send a prompt, but doesn't know how to critically think about information that's presented. And
Right.
that creates a rather large and uncomfortable risk for those of us that are looking down the road at the next generation of doctors, or the next generation of civil
Mhm.
engineers, or the next generation of lawyers. If they
Right.
can't Google or look at Chat GPT when they're in the middle of a courtroom, are they able to know when to object? Now, that's a stupid example, and I'm being really about it, but the
Right.
principle is sound.
Yeah. I think that though it does create an issue where there's this risk for people maybe not having the skills that they would have without, AI.
Right.
But living or going forward into the next 10 years or 30 years or forever, where AI is a reality, I think it almost, on the flip side, creates an awesome landscape for people who have natural skills or soft skills to excel, right? People who have a natural ability to connect with other human beings, a natural ability to do high level problem solving. These are the places where human beings that potentially maybe have gotten the short end of the stick, like working in sales or marketing or these business operations or these things where it's like these high level tactical decisions that need to be made that can't be just put into an AI. Those people's jobs and those people coming up in the future can't be replaced, or at least not now. And so the thing is like for me, right? Like I think about this a lot. Where if you're working in like a marketing campaign, you can use ChatGPT to do certain things, right? Like ChatGPT knows about standard marketing cycles, marketing mixes, these types of things. But you cannot replace a creative director.
Right.
You cannot replace someone who goes, you know what? How do I deliver this message in a creative way that actually empathizes with other people, right? Or people can relate to in an emotional way. Like Apple just their one of their big ad campaigns that came out that I think will definitely be a case study coming into the next few years of school is like their hearing aid AirPod feature, right?
Mhm.
And so it's like you cannot have AI just generate a campaign like that. It has to have a human touch. And I think that the people behind that are some of the people, or the people coming into the workforce that have the ability to do things like that, are going to excel in ways that people don't even realize right now. Where things that typically were hard skills, right? Like physical skills, where can you code, can you not? Were typically sought after, and in 2020 to 2024, were highly paid. Directly out of college, you can make $100,000 a year, if more. But now it's becoming, what can you solve without the tools, right? Or it's almost like, what does your brain think? Like when I first started here at Clarify, I talked a lot about how um, AI and technology companies forget about the people,
Mhm.
right? And we cannot forget about how we are a people company first,
Mhm.
right? And I think that that sort of, who can connect with human beings better, is going to be a huge industry changer and driver coming into the next few years. And this idea that you can create product, especially in this open source wave that's coming, everyone and their mom is going to be able to put out a product,
Mhm.
but who can connect with their client and who can sell that product is going to be the differentiating factor between businesses, I think. Kind of like we talked about with OpenAI.
Yeah, I agree. And throwing money at a problem isn't just going to solve it. Oh well, I'm gonna spin up my AI so it goes 32% faster than this other guy's AI does, and it'll solve all our marketing problems.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, for a lot of tech bros, and even for me, I tend to be a tech bro in this space. You know, the world is still full of people. It's
Right.
not full of machines. It's not mathematical. It's not simple. It's not predictable. There are certain things that people do, but there's more and more outliers. There's more and more strange connections, more and more weird um, curves that we're trying to deal with. And that those changes are people to people. So we are selling a product to a person who is then selling a product to a person. We're not, even if you're buying stuff for your dog or your cat, they're not buying it. You're buying it for them. So we're still
Right.
selling a product to a person. And we're still selling AI to a person. And to address a comment that you made about, people are not replaceable. Everybody's replaceable. Everyone. You can replace a creative director with a machine. Now the question is not whether or not they're replaceable, it's whether or not it's a good idea.
Right, right.
You
You
can
could do it, it just will be terrible.
crash burn. But I think that in this space, the adage is starting to run around now, is you are not, as a software developer, you are not going to be replaced by AI, but you are going to be replaced by another developer with AI. So
Right.
in being able to use the tool for what it is, and not I do it, we do it, our AI has a name, but anthropomorphizing a device can have its downsides as well. You think, oh, I've got this AI that's going to solve it. And the products that are out there where we're a software developer AI and you can put us in Slack and we'll solve all those problems for you. The resounding response from a lot of people is that thing's not working. So
Right.
it's that doesn't mean that it won't. But in the current state right now, how much are you willing to bet on the future when you could find a really good junior software developer who's fresh out of college and pay them a reasonable rate when that developer has demonstrated I have a mastery of Copilot and Anthropic and Claude and this other stuff, and I can send out different prompts and I can get code methods spit out in like 30 seconds and then check them against logic and make sure that it lines up with what the senior or the architects are telling me to do. That person is a gold mine. So
Right.
they'll churn out code faster than so many other people can, and then figure out over time how to integrate that. Eventually, they become a senior who understands exactly how the AI should integrate with the process, and we get accelerations, we get economies at that point. Will eventually an AI be able to replace a human? I think ultimately yes, but I don't know what that timeline will ever be. Could it be 50 years? Could it be 5 years? It's a crapshoot, and largely because of how intelligence works. Not talking about consciousness right now. That's a whole
Right,
different
right.
conversation that I need a whole lot more alcohol to get into. About intelligence, problem solving intelligence. intelligence. There's a giant pile of research that says our intelligence, human intelligence, is the summation of tens of thousands of microprocesses that happen within our brain and with our body. So it's not just one process that's executing. It's all these little things that are working around, little systems that are working together. And then our intelligence kind of emerges from that as one driving force with all these systems working together. And I've really radically simplified a lot of neuroscience into but that emergence of intelligence and being able to solve problems and think creatively, and we don't understand hardly anything about it. You want to really melt somebody's brain, say, figure out how to map a memory engram onto a processor, and they'll come out of the woodwork, start throwing things. Neuroscientists and computer scientists and doctors, engineers, and everybody will fight. So broken bottles, it was a big horror. That But that doesn't preclude intelligence emerging from an artificially intelligent system with enough modules and focus and actions, which my belief is that that's why OpenAI makes comments like, oh, we know how to get AGI, so now we're going to focus on ASI. There's too many assumptions there. There's too many assumptions that by saying you know how to do it, we're just constrained by processing power and all of this other stuff. That becomes a little bit zealot like and not very scientific. So, is there the possibility that we can create this emergent intelligence that would then be smart enough to start doing things generally and on its own and all of this? Absolutely. Is that going to happen from an LLM? I genuinely don't think so. Um,
Right.
I think that an LLM is just one piece of a comprehensive AI system. And would that then emergent intelligence, that is a combination of things, including an LLM, would that be able to replace a creative director? Now, that'd be an interesting problem. That'd be an interesting.
Yeah, it would be an interesting problem. The thing is at least for me, maybe I'm naive. It's just there's
Well,
certain things that I think require human touch,
yes.
and
I
I
think we
think
always
that
will.
and I think that people can always be optimized with AI. Like no matter what you do, your life and your workflow and your productivity and your ability to create can always be improved with the tools. Kind of like you mentioned, the junior like engineer. And I think that, like, for example, you say you have a small marketing team and then now they're able to disperse more media or content through AI, these types of things. But I think that at the end of the day, maybe this is me again being naive, but we've talked about this off camera before where I just think that at the end of the day, some things require human touch. And I think that the reason behind why people purchase items, especially in a business context, it it almost cannot always be mapped through AI. Like for example, we had this thought experiment like a while ago where we talked about like why do people buy haircuts, right? And it's like, yes, you want your hair cut. That is the service that you are purchasing. But we also talked about people are buying the ability to feel good about themselves. People are buying the ability to go home and look good for their girlfriend, or they're buying the ability to walk into that job interview and feel confident. These are
Right.
things that I don't know if an AI could. Maybe not, I don't want to say ever, obviously, but I don't know if these are things that AI could within the next 10 years necessarily like
I
conquer
don't
or
think
take.
that I don't think that first of all, don't be talking shit about my haircut,
Yeah,
man. Second,
you're not buying many haircuts.
I said not really, not really. At the rate that I'm going, pretty soon I won't need any haircut. I think that you're right in that in the next 10 years, I mean, unless something almost miraculous happens, the path that we are on with generative artificial intelligence leading to general artificial intelligence or artificial general intelligence is rocky and a little twisty and probably more than 2 decades out.
Right.
I'd love to be proven wrong. I'd love it. With actual data, people show up and oh, this is AGI. You should read this article. That's not a scientific paper. That's not peer reviewed. That's not engineering. That's somebody throwing out some.
Some guy on
Show me,
Reddit.
show me the stuff. Show me the stuff. Because if you do show me the stuff and it ends up being, and I'm totally wrong, I'll eat it. I'll be like, I was absolutely wrong. We got AGI. We're 3 minutes from here. But right now, I don't see that. I see that there is a lot of hype. There is a lot of excitement, which is great. Don't get me wrong, but it's not going to get us there. There needs to be some realistic, okay, what are we actually engineering? What are we trying to build? What problem are we trying to solve? We're trying to make a conscious machine. Okay, great. Are we willing to sacrifice the entire planet to do that? Because that seems ridiculous. So let's figure out a way to create this balance. Um, will that conscious, generally intelligent machine be able to successfully replace a human? I think only time's going to tell us that. Because at some point, on a long enough timeline, whether it's us as humans or some fancy ancient alien that shows up that helped us build pyramids, that's a joke. I don't believe that. It's math, not aliens. Or the AI becomes so intelligent and so capable that it supplants us as a type of life form. I think that unless we bomb ourselves ridiculously into the Stone Age, or we idiocracy raises its head and intelligence becomes anathema, kind of like it is now, then we will successfully reach the point where we create a conscious thinking machine that is active and evolving in real time. That we could interact with and would be virtually, at least from our perspective, indistinguishable from a human. At that point, we lose some of the magic of consciousness. We lose some of the magic of humanity because this machine could either mimic us so convincingly that we are convinced, Turing test, or it's become further than that, and it's more capable, and it's something completely different. But in either of those perspectives, in my personal opinion, I think we're barking up the wrong tree, thinking that we're going to wake up an LLM. The AI is going to be a much more advanced and complex system than just a language model, which admittedly, language models are incredibly complex. So it's not to decry any of the work that people are doing in that space. We're doing work in that space, but it's more than that. It's much more complex than that. And for the foreseeable future, I think the solution, or rather the best solution to solve so many of the problems that we are faced with across the world, whether it's food or the climate or energy or material science or any of these things, the answer is not an AI. It's not AI. It is a human with an AI. And then you augment those humans, and that's power.
Right.
That's because then you have the creativity and the abstract thinking and the biological meat that makes people think, coupled with the analytical high speed ability that computers generate. I think the focus should not necessarily be on building a super intelligence, but on narrowing the bridge between humans and machines until eventually we're actually coupled. And at that point, you've created something new, something
Mhm.
that is not an AI, which would admittedly be new, and it's not a human. It is this union of these two things. And that's part of the work that we're trying to do with Clarify, as crazy as it sounds, is what we want to monitor your health in real time. We don't want to do it. We want to give you the ability to do it. We want you to be able to see it, like, oh, what's going on here? Why is this hurt? Why did I eat this food and it doesn't feel good? What are these things that are going on? The machine augments the person and then
Right.
eventually becomes something completely different. Brain machine
Yeah.
interfaces are all over the place. There's a lot of players that are playing in that space. That person, augmented with technology, would replace your creative director in a heartbeat. But they're still human to a degree based on
Mhm.
their understanding. So that's that's the direction we're trying to go. That's the direction a lot of other think tanks are trying to go. Is let's close that gap. Let's put
Mhm.
human machines in the same spot and see what happens. And
Yeah.
obviously, there's a whole raft of ethical and moral and religious, that's what the liquor's for. So,
Well, just to kind of wrap things up, it seems like the key takeaways here is that AI is in a really weird dynamic place right now. Whether it's OpenAI, there's a Trump's infrastructure bill, these things. But the future of AI is still and always will be intriguing. And less so to think about it in a way of replacing humans, but making humans better, right? How do we create or maybe not more productivity, but how do we make life and work and all these things that humans want to do easier through the ease of information and technology?
yeah,
And those are the things where it's almost like, how do we create AI as top of mind as wearing shoes every day, right? Like you take your shoes everywhere. you have your AI everywhere, and
Yep.
therefore you can walk in places you normally wouldn't with your shoes, and you can walk in places you normally wouldn't with your AI, right?
Yeah.
And so
One.
I think that that's just a great way to sum it up. It's just AI's future and present is just super dynamic and super interesting. And
Oh
that's
yeah.
why we have this podcast to stay tuned.
I'm sure next week we'll have all kind of new shit to talk about that we don't even know what's going
Oh
to
my
happen.
goodness. All right, guys. As always, drop your questions, comments, concerns in the bottom or in the comments below, or email us at or Matt and Shane at clarified-tech.com. See you guys later.